Adriana Carter pushed through the throng at O'Hare, her worn leather briefcase a familiar weight against her hip. At 27, she lived for due process, for the quiet victories in overcrowded courtrooms. Today was supposed to be one of them. A critical pro bono hearing, a chance to prove the system, however flawed, could still work. She just had to get there. Her eyes scanned the gate number, her chest tight with a familiar pre-flight anxiety that had nothing to do with turbulence and everything to do with missing a deadline. She clutched her boarding pass, the paper crinkling under her nervous grip. This was it. Almost there. Then the smile of the gate agent faltered. "I'm so sorry, Miss Carter," the woman began, her voice dripping with practiced regret. "It seems there's been a misprint. Your seat, it's no longer available." Adriana blinked. "What do you mean, not available?" "I confirmed yesterday. This is my flight." Her voice was too calm, a sign of the storm brewing. Inside, this couldn't be happening. Not now. "All flights are booked, Miss Carter. We're truly sorry." The words hit her like a physical blow. Stranded, fuming, her belief in the meticulous, ordered world of law and justice felt like a childish fantasy. Bureaucratic incompetence, a misprint, was about to unravel everything she'd fought for. Her client, her principles, all because of a piece of paper. The system hadn't worked today. It had failed her. As Adriana argued, a low, resonant voice cut through the background hum of the terminal. "Is there a problem, Signorina?" She turned. Standing just a few feet away was a man who looked utterly out of place in the fluorescent chaos. He was impeccably dressed, a dark suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, tailored to perfection. His dark eyes, a shade of deep, intense espresso, held an unnerving intensity as they met hers. Power emanated from him, a silent, almost predatory hum. A silver signet ring gleamed on his finger, catching the artificial light, and in his hand, an embossed passport cover. He watched her, not with curiosity, but with a knowledge that sent a shiver down her spine. "My flight," Adriana managed, gesturing uselessly at the gate. "My seat is gone." He offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "A common, modern tragedy." He stepped closer, and his presence filled her space, warm and dangerous. "Perhaps I can offer a solution. I'm flying private to Naples from the executive terminals. A simple solution for two people with travel woes, wouldn't you agree?" Adriana's breath hitched. A private jet to Naples. It was too perfect, too bizarre. Every alarm bell in her fiercely rational brain shrieked. This man, Lorenzo Vitale, as he smoothly introduced himself, was a walking question mark wrapped in bespoke silk. He exuded an aura of powerful ambiguity that both repelled and captivated her. But the alternative, a missed hearing, betraying her client, letting down her principles. The image of her client's hopeful face flashed in her mind. Her pragmatism, cold and unyielding, wrestled with her caution. She didn't know this man. She didn't trust him. But she had no other choice. This flight, this impossible offer, was her only way forward. "Yes," she heard herself say, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "Yes, I agree." A knot of unease, cold and heavy, formed deep in her stomach. She had accepted. She was going to Naples with a charming stranger who watched her with unnerving intensity. This was not due process. This was a leap into the unknown, and a part of her wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The private jet was unlike anything Adriana had ever seen, let alone stepped foot inside. It wasn't just first class, it was a sky-high palace. Deep leather seats swallowed her. Rich mahogany gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, and the silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the engines. No screaming children, no cramped legroom, no stale air, just pure, unadulterated luxury. A silver tray materialized with a crystal glass of sparkling water, delivered by a man whose movements were so discreet she barely registered his presence. Lorenzo, however, was anything but discreet. He settled into the seat opposite her, his dark eyes never leaving her face. He was a charming, attentive host, his voice a low, melodic rumble as he spoke of the view, of the intricate dance of law and justice across borders. He asked about her work, her passion for immigration law, the intricacies of due process. Adriana found herself, against her better judgment, opening up, sharing her ideals, her frustrations with a system often too slow, too rigid. She watched his expressions, trying to find a flaw, a tell, but his face remained a mask of polite interest, his gaze unwavering. She observed him, every fibre of her being on high alert. His casual command was evident in the subtle nods he gave his staff, the way they anticipated his every need. It was the quiet power of a man accustomed to being obeyed. An undeniable, dangerous attraction began to prickle beneath her skin. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and utterly captivating. His charisma was a silken trap, and she felt herself drawn to it, even as her mind screamed caution. Every instinct told her to run, but every other part of her wanted to lean closer, to understand the mystery behind those intense eyes. He didn't just listen. He absorbed, his questions precise, aimed right at the heart of her legal focus. Then, mid-flight, the pretense dropped. He leaned forward, his voice losing its casual warmth, replaced by a steel that sent a fresh shiver down her spine. "Adriana," he said, and the way he pronounced her name, drawn out, possessive, made her heart hammer. "I know who you are, I know about your work, and I specifically requested your presence." The cabin, moments before a haven of luxury, suddenly felt like a cage. Adriana's breath caught. Requested. What did that even mean? Her mind raced, replaying every moment since the misprinted boarding pass. It hadn't been an accident. It had been a setup. "My off-the-books business, as you might imagine," he continued, a hint of something dark in his smile, "necessitates a unique perspective. Your legal brain, Adriana, is exactly what I need for a very sensitive family matter." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. An extradition trap, an innocent cousin, and a system that is about to swallow him whole. The air crackled with a new, terrifying energy. The luxurious flight, the charming host, the accidental encounter. It was all a lie. Adriana wasn't just a passenger, she was a pawn, lured onto this gilded bird by a man who knew exactly who she was and what he wanted from her. The knot in her stomach tightened into a cold, hard stone. She was no longer just traveling to Naples. She was flying into a storm. The jet settled onto the tarmac, a whisper-soft landing that belied the storm brewing inside Adriana. She followed Lorenzo down the steps, the warm Neapolitan air hitting her face like a soft caress. It was a stark contrast to the sterile chill of O'Hare, a world away. A sleek black Mercedes waited, its tinted windows mirroring the sky. Lorenzo gestured, and she slid into the opulent back seat, the scent of fine leather and something vaguely metallic, like money, filling the air. The drive was a blur of ancient stones and vibrant colors, the chaotic energy of Naples washing over her. She saw Vespas darting through narrow streets, laundry hanging from balconies like colorful flags, and the endless shimmering blue of the Tyrrhenian Sea. It was breathtaking, overwhelming, and utterly alien. She tried to focus on the beauty, but the knot in her stomach tightened with every turn. She wasn't a tourist. She was a captive. The car ascended a winding road, finally pulling through ornate gates. Before her stood a villa, ancient and grand, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the bay. Terraces spilled down towards the water, draped in bougainvillea, and the air hummed with the sound of cicadas. This was not just luxury, it was obscene wealth, generations deep. The Chicago apartment she'd left behind felt like a dusty memory. Inside, marble floors stretched into impossibly high ceilings, every surface gleaming. A woman, elegant and silent, offered her a glass of chilled white wine. Adriana took it, her fingers trembling. Slightly, the beauty was overwhelming, a seductive trap. This wasn't a prison with bars, it was a gilded cage designed to make her forget her principles, her life. She was utterly alone, miles from everything familiar, with a man who knew her name before she'd spoken it. Lorenzo appeared, shedding his jacket, his presence filling the vast room. He held a glass of amber liquid, his dark eyes intense. "Adriana," he began, his voice losing its charming veneer, becoming harder, colder. "It's time. You understood why you are here." He laid it out, piece by agonizing piece. His cousin Matteo, an innocent man, caught in a monstrous web. A corrupt Chicago alderman, a man named Burke, colluding with a Neapolitan prosecutor, Rossi. Their scheme? A humanitarian visa pipeline, twisting a system meant for good into a conduit for exploitation. They were using desperate people, trafficking them, then discarding them. Matteo, Lorenzo's family, had stumbled onto their operation. Now he was about to be illegally extradited, disappeared into a system designed to crush him. Adriana felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The scale of the corruption was staggering, a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a misprint. This was a conspiracy, vast and chilling. "I need you, Adriana," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a low growl, "to expose this scheme, to save Matteo, without sacrificing my family's integrity and without, crucially, sacrificing your own bar standing." He paused, his gaze fixed on her. "My code, Adriana, is simple. No trafficking, no exploitation. This operation violates even my own dark, moral compass." Horror rose in her throat, choking her. This was more than she could ever have imagined. Legal peril, implied criminality, a world she'd only read about in thrillers. She was an immigration lawyer, not a crusader against international crime syndicates. Her career, her entire future, would be incinerated if she touched this. "No," she said, the word a desperate whisper. She tried again, forcing strength into her voice. "No, I can't. This is impossible. It will destroy everything I've worked for, everything I believe in." She looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and outrage. His deep involvement, the dangerous currents swirling around him, threatened to pull her under. She vehemently refused, her ideals screaming against the tide of his power. This was a nightmare, and she needed to wake up. "You don't understand, Lorenzo," Adriana said, her voice shaking. With a fury she barely contained. "My bar standing, my career, it's everything. I can't risk it for this. This isn't a legal case, it's a war." He walked towards her, slowly, deliberately, until he stood just inches away. His eyes, dark and fathomless, held hers captive. He didn't raise his voice, yet every word resonated with an undeniable authority. "Adriana, you are already risking it. By accepting a seat on my jet, by being here in my home, you are implicated. Your choice now isn't if. You get involved, but how you navigate the storm you're already in." Her blood ran cold. He wasn't threatening her, not overtly, but the truth of his words landed with the weight of a physical blow. She was trapped. Her flight, her supposed misprint, everything had led her here, to this impossible crossroads. "Your idealism, Adriana," he continued, his voice a low, persuasive rumble, "is a rare commodity in this world. You believe in due process, in justice for the innocent. Matteo is innocent. He is caught in a system that is rigged, designed to destroy him. Your skills, your mind, are the only way to cut through this corruption without resorting to the less conventional methods available to me. He wasn't asking her to break the law. He was asking her to wield it, to twist it back against those who had perverted it. Her ethical compass spun wildly, a frantic needle searching for true north in a landscape suddenly devoid of moral landmarks. Lorenzo stepped past her, heading to a large, antique desk. He tapped a tablet, and a series of complex files, encrypted and detailed, flashed across the screen. Alderman Burke, Prosecutor Rossi, their financial flows, their shell corporations, the names of the victims in their pipeline, all of it. This isn't conjecture, Adriana, this is proof. Proof that the system you fight to uphold is being used to enslave and exploit. Her eyes widened, scanning the data. It was overwhelming, sickening. The meticulous detail, the undeniable. Evidence of their monstrous scheme laid bare. This wasn't just a local scandal, it was an international human trafficking operation disguised as humanitarian aid. The injustice of it burned, a hot coal in her gut. Later, they were in a sleek Maserati, tracing the winding, perilous roads of the Amalfi coast. The sheer cliffs dropped away to the shimmering turquoise sea, the sun a blinding splash of gold on the water. The beauty was heart-stopping, a cruel contrast to the grim reality that had brought her here. Lorenzo drove with an unnerving ease, his hand on the wheel, his profile stark against the vivid landscape. The air in the car was thick with unspoken tension, the intellectual sparring from the villa continuing, now amplified by their close proximity. He pointed out ancient ruins, shared snippets of local history, but his words were always laced with subtle probes, tests of her resolve, her knowledge. He wanted to see how her mind worked, how she would react under pressure. Adriana found herself arguing, debating, pushing back against his cynical view of the world, even as her own idealism felt bruised and battered. She felt the dangerous pull again, that undeniable attraction to his sharp mind, his quiet power, his utter, unwavering certainty. His intelligence was a match for hers, his charisma a potent, intoxicating force. Every glance, every shared moment of intense focus on the case ignited a spark she desperately tried to smother. He was a dark star, and she felt herself orbiting closer, despite every warning instinct. He wasn't asking her to compromise her ethics by breaking the law. He was asking her to use the law, to bend it, to make it work for justice against those who thought themselves above it. It was a subtle, insidious temptation. Her professional ethics screamed caution, warning her away from the abyss of his world. But her conscience, stirred by the sheer, unadulterated injustice in those files, tugged her towards the edge. An innocent, a man caught in a trap of corruption. The very system she believed in was being perverted. Could she truly stand by, knowing she held the key? The question gnawed at her, tearing at her resolve through the long, silent hours. The long night had stretched Adriana's nerves thin, each hour a fresh battle between her ethics and her conscience. The sun, when it finally crept over the Neapolitan hills, painted the villa in hues of impossible beauty, mocking the turmoil inside her. She hadn't slept, not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Matteo's innocent face, the chilling details of the visa pipeline, and Lorenzo's dark, commanding eyes. He hadn't asked her to break the law, but to use it, to fight for justice. Could she? Could she truly turn her back on an innocent man, knowing she had the power, the mind, to save him? She found him on a shadowed terrace, a cup of espresso steaming beside him. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable, but she felt his silent expectation. He knew. "My terms, Lorenzo," she began, her voice hoarse from disuse but firm. She met his gaze, refusing to waver. Complete autonomy over the legal strategy. Every decision, every move is mine. You provide the information, the access, but I run the legal side. He inclined his head, a slow, deliberate movement. And full transparency. I need to know everything, every detail, no matter how unconventional. No secrets that could compromise my legal standing. She paused, taking a deep breath. This was the hardest part. And absolutely no illegal actions that would jeopardize my bar standing. I will not break the law for you. I will use it. A muscle twitched in his jaw. His eyes narrowed, studying her, searching for weakness. Adriana held her ground, her spine rigid. She had lost her flight, her sense of control. But she would not lose herself. Finally, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't charming now. It was something deeper. A hint. Of respect she hadn't seen before. Agreed, Adriana. Your terms are accepted. Relief, sharp and sudden, flooded her, quickly followed by a cold wave of terror. She had committed. She was in. Lorenzo reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet pouch. He tipped its contents into his palm. It was a silver signet ring, simple in design but clearly ancient, worn smooth in places, bearing an intricate, almost abstract crest. It gleamed, catching the morning light. "This," he said, extending his hand towards her, "is a symbol of my family and now of our trust. Wear it. It will offer a certain protection while you are in Naples." Adriana stared at the ring, then at his outstretched hand. It was a covenant, a dangerous binding promise. It was an embrace into his world, a world she had no place in, yet one she was now irrevocably tied to. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Accepting it meant accepting everything. Her fingers trembled as she took the ring. It felt cool and heavy in her palm. She slid it onto her right hand, where it settled perfectly on her middle finger. It was a silent weight, a constant reminder of the pact she had just made. The silver felt cold against her skin, yet it pulsed with an unexpected, almost fierce warmth. She was no longer just Adriana Carter, immigration lawyer. She was Adriana Carter, bound by a silver ring, allied with a man of dangerous power. "Good," Lorenzo said, watching her intently. "Now, what do you need?" Her mind, which had felt fractured moments before, suddenly snapped into focus. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now a focused, sharp edge. It was fuel. She was a lawyer. This was a case. "Everything," she declared, her voice stronger now, imbued with a new, fierce resolve. "Every document, every communication, every victim statement you have. I need to build a case that will rip Burke and Rossi apart, piece by legal piece. And I need it now." She looked at the ring, then back at Lorenzo. The dangerous covenant was sealed. Her work began. Adriana plunged into the documents Lorenzo provided, her mind a whirlwind of outrage and professional precision. The sheer volume was staggering, a meticulously organized digital archive of depravity. She sat, hunched over a large oak table in the villa's library, surrounded by ancient tomes, but her world was now pixels and proof. She spent hours, then days, dissecting the corrupt Chicago alderman Burke and the Neapolitan prosecutor Rossi. Their scheme was a monstrous perversion of humanitarian law. They exploited a legitimate fast-track visa program meant to offer sanctuary to the truly vulnerable, turning it into a human pipeline. Burke, with his political influence, identified desperate immigrants in Chicago, promising them expedited visas to Italy through a network of fraudulent charities. Rossi in Naples would then discover these individuals, fabricating minor infractions or false asylum claims, effectively trapping them in a legal limbo. They would then be forced into indentured servitude or coerced into illegal activities to pay off their debts for the fraudulent visas. Matteo, Lorenzo's cousin, had been working as a paralegal at one of Burke's front organizations, a supposedly legitimate immigration consultancy, when he'd stumbled upon the true nature of their operation. He'd seen the ledger, the falsified records, the terrified faces of the victims. The injustice was a physical ache in Adriana's chest. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing names, dates, forged documents. She identified the specific legal manipulations, the loopholes they twisted, the genuine humanitarian visas they hijacked for their own dark purposes. Burke's signature was on a dozen fraudulent applications, Rossi's stamp on the bogus deportation orders. The chilling misuse of a system designed for good made her blood run cold. She felt a burning need to expose them, to tear their carefully constructed edifice of lies to the ground. Lorenzo moved like a shadow in the periphery of her workspace, silent, observing. He brought her coffee, meals, but never interrupted her intense focus. He seemed to understand the sacred space of her legal mind. But then, a subtle shift. He entered the library, his face grim. The air crackled with a new urgency. "Intelligence suggests," he said, his voice low, "that Burke and Rossi are sensing movement. They're accelerating Matteo's extradition. They want him gone, silenced, before anyone can connect him to their operation." Adriana's head snapped up, her heart hammered. Accelerating? That meant less time. The threat to her bar standing, once a distant fear, now felt immediate, suffocating. If she failed, if she was exposed, she wouldn't just lose her career. She could face legal repercussions from two powerful, ruthless men who had proven they would stop at nothing. She wasn't just fighting for Matteo. She was fighting for her own professional survival. She watched Lorenzo work too. He wasn't just a charming stranger. He was the head of a complex, sprawling network. Phones buzzed, hushed conversations in Italian drifted from distant rooms. She saw the fierce, unyielding loyalty his men showed him, the quiet efficiency of their movements. He issued orders, concise and unwavering, but she never heard him demand anything that violated his stated code. "No trafficking, no exploitation," he'd said. She saw it in action. He wasn't a monster, not in the way Burke and Rossi were. He was a man with a dark moral compass, yes, but one that still pointed, however imperfectly, towards a twisted form of justice. His concern for Matteo was palpable, raw. It wasn't just about family. It was about principle. Matteo was innocent, and Lorenzo would move heaven and earth to protect him. This wasn't about profit for him, it was about loyalty. And as Adriana delved deeper into the corruption, seeing the victims' faces in the documents, she understood a truth she never thought she would. Sometimes, even in the shadows, loyalty could be a beacon, but she also knew that beacon could burn her alive. She had to be faster. Adriana knew she needed more. The files Lorenzo provided were damning. But to build an unassailable case, she required specific legal precedents, recent rulings, and detailed demographic data from Chicago, data that only her old firm had access to. She couldn't risk a direct call to her senior partners. That would expose her, and likely them. It had to be discreet. It had to be untraceable. She thought of Sarah, a bright, ambitious junior associate she'd mentored. Sarah was meticulous, trustworthy, and still green enough to follow instructions without asking too many questions. Adriana drafted an email, carefully coded, as if for a complex, hypothetical pro bono case. She requested specific public records and statistical analysis, framing it as research for a new initiative. It was a risk, a calculated gamble that Sarah wouldn't read between the lines. Her stomach churned as she sent it, feeling the miles between her and Chicago stretch into an unbridgeable chasm. Lorenzo watched her from the doorway of the library, his presence a silent weight. "You need to be alone for this, don't you?" he asked, his voice soft, almost understanding. She nodded, a wave of relief washing over her that he wasn't arguing. The temporary separation, even if it was just him stepping out of the room, felt like a vital breath of fresh air. She needed to feel like her, Adriana Carter, lawyer, not just his pawn. He left, and the silence of the ancient villa pressed in around her. The reply came a day later, a torrent of data Sarah had compiled with impressive speed. Adriana felt a surge of pride, and then a pang of fear. Sarah was unknowingly exposing herself by helping. Adriana meticulously cross-referenced the new information with Lorenzo's files, seeing the corruption deepen, the threads connecting Burke and Rossi tighten. Then a second email from Sarah marked urgent. Adriana's heart leapt into her throat. The message was terse, professional, but the underlying panic was palpable. Sarah mentioned a former client, Mr. Henderson, a man Adriana had represented years ago in a relatively minor immigration matter. He had recently become a vocal supporter of Alderman Burke's community initiatives. Henderson had been calling the firm, asking pointed questions about Adriana's sudden sabbatical. He'd inquired about her current client list, specifically cases involving Italian immigrants. The firm had, of course, stonewalled him, citing client confidentiality. But the message was clear. Someone was looking for her. Someone connected to Burke knew she was gone and was probing for weaknesses, for connections. A cold dread seeped into Adriana's bones. They knew, or at least they suspected. Burke was trying to find out who she was working with, who she had left vulnerable back. In Chicago, her client list, her ethical obligation to protect them, was now a potential target. This wasn't just about saving Matteo anymore. It was about protecting every single person she had ever represented. Her hands shook as she closed the laptop, the screen reflecting her pale, terrified face. She found Lorenzo on the terrace, gazing out at the sea. She didn't have to explain. He seemed to sense the shift in her, the fresh wave of panic. "Burke is looking for me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Through a former client, he's asking about my cases, my client list." Lorenzo turned, his dark eyes instantly sharpened, predatory. "He suspects you're involved." It wasn't a question, and he's trying to find leverage. He didn't need to ask for details. Adriana watched him, a silent command passing between him and one of his men who had materialized from the shadows. Lorenzo spoke in rapid, low Italian, his voice like flint. The man nodded, already turning to leave. "What did you do?" Adriana asked, a tremor in her voice. "I'm ensuring your old firm, and particularly your Miss Sarah, becomes a very uninteresting target for Alderman Burke's inquiries," Lorenzo replied, his gaze returning to the horizon. "Your client list, Adriana, is now under discreet protection. Burke won't find anything there. He won't even want to look." Her stomach lurched. He had done it without asking, without her knowledge. His network, his reach, was terrifyingly vast, a silent, invisible. And stretching across continents, he had protected her, yes, but in doing so, he had reinforced her utter dependence on him, on his world. She was a pawn, a piece on his chessboard, and he was moving her, and everyone connected to her without her consent. The realization was unsettling, a bitter pill to swallow. The silver signet ring felt heavy, a cold band of absolute power on her finger. She was safe, for now. But at what cost to her autonomy, her very self? The question hung heavy in the warm Neapolitan air. Adriana needed a lifeline, a connection to the world of law she understood, the one that still promised justice. She thought of Judge Elaine Morrison, her mentor, the woman who had first seen the fire in Adriana's belly for immigration law. Morrison was a bastion of integrity, a judge whose rulings were as sharp as her wit. If anyone could offer a glimmer of hope, a legal strategy for a hypothetical case mirroring Mateo's, it was Judge Morrison. She composed an email, agonizing over every word. It had to be vague enough to protect herself, yet detailed enough to elicit real guidance. She described a complex, multi-jurisdictional humanitarian visa fraud, a hypothetical scenario involving a corrupt alderman and a foreign prosecutor. She emphasized the urgency, the potential for injustice. Her finger hovered over the send button, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was her last real link to her old life, her old ideals. The reply came a few hours later, shorter than expected. Adriana opened it, her breath held tight in her chest. Adriana, the email read, formal and clipped. I received your inquiry. While I appreciate your dedication to complex issues, I must caution you against delving into hypotheticals that could potentially intersect with highly sensitive, ongoing investigations. It is not prudent for an attorney to speculate on such matters, particularly without full, direct client representation. Focus on your established caseload. We can discuss your career trajectory when you return. The words were a cold slap. Adriana reread them, her mind struggling to reconcile the tone with the mentor she knew. Judge Morrison, her rock, her moral compass, was not just shutting her down. She was actively discouraging her line of inquiry, not prudent, without full direct client representation. The evasiveness was a stark contrast to Morrison's usual directness. There was no warmth, no offer of a discreet phone call, no subtle hint of understanding. A sickening fear bloomed in Adriana's chest. Was it possible? Had Alderman Burke's long reach, his insidious influence, extended even to Judge Morrison? The thought was a poison, seeping into her carefully constructed world. Her mentor, the woman who embodied everything Adriana aspired to be, seemed compromised. Her heart sank, a heavy stone dropping into an empty well. The system she believed in, the one she was fighting to uphold, felt like it was crumbling around her. This perceived betrayal left her reeling, profoundly isolated. She had risked everything to save Mateo, to expose corruption, and now even her most trusted ally in the legitimate world seemed to be turning her back. She was adrift, caught between the dangerous world of Lorenzo Vitale and a seemingly corrupt, indifferent legal system. She found Lorenzo in the villa's study, surrounded by maps and ringing phones. He looked up, sensing her distress immediately. "Morrison," she choked out, the name feeling like ash on her tongue. She basically told me to back off, said it wasn't prudent. "Lorenzo, she's compromised. Burke's got to her." He listened intently, his dark eyes never leaving her face. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer facile reassurances. He simply absorbed her fear, her anger, her profound sense of betrayal. When she finished, his silence stretched, heavy and thoughtful. "The system has more layers than you can imagine, Adriana," he finally said. His voice low, a cryptic rumble. "Some are hidden, some are simply too dark to see, and some require a different kind of vision." He reached out, his hand briefly covering hers, a silent offer of support. "But Judge Morrison is a formidable woman. Perhaps she's simply playing her own game." Adriana pulled her hand away, his words doing little to soothe her. Her own game? What game could possibly involve abandoning an innocent man and her own mentee? The thought was unsettling. He felt caught, truly caught, between two powerful, ambiguous forces. Her trust, already hanging by a thread, felt like it was fraying completely. She was alone, navigating a treacherous landscape where even her most trusted guides had become shadows. Adriana found Lorenzo in the study again, the map still spread across the antique table, but her focus was no longer on his cryptic words. Her mentor's perceived betrayal had solidified something fierce inside her. If she was truly alone, she would fight even harder. She would be the system she believed in. "We need to move, Lorenzo, now." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the heavy silence of the room. She walked to the table, sweeping aside a stack of papers to clear a space. Her mind was a whirlwind of legal strategy, every piece of information she'd absorbed now clicking into place. Burke and Rossi are accelerating Matteo's extradition. That means they're vulnerable. They're making mistakes. Lorenzo watched her, his dark eyes intense, a silent invitation for her to continue. "My plan is simple, but meticulous," she began, her finger tapping the table with each point. "We target their victims, the people caught in their humanitarian visa pipeline. They are our witnesses. They are the proof." He raised an eyebrow. "You want to find them? These people are scattered, many in hiding. Some are likely terrified to speak." "Precisely," Adriana countered, her gaze unwavering. "And that's where you come in, your network, your resources. I need you to locate them discreetly, safely. Bring them to me one by one. I will take their affidavits." A flash of something akin to admiration crossed his face. "Notarized affidavits? That's slow." "It's ironclad," she corrected, her voice firm. "It's legal, it's unimpeachable. Each affidavit will detail their experiences, the fraudulent promises, the forced labor, the coercion. We compile enough of these, and we don't just have a case. We have an indictment that will bring down both Burke and Rossi without firing a single shot." She could see him weighing her words, the instinct for more direct, forceful action warring with the meticulousness of her legal approach. It was slower, yes, but it was also undeniable. It left no room for his enemies to wriggle free. "And their protection?" he asked, his voice low. "If they speak, they become targets." "Your responsibility," Adriana stated, meeting his gaze. "You ensure their safety before, during, and after they speak to me. You ensure their privacy. No one, absolutely no one, gets to them." He nodded slowly, a hint of respect in his eyes. He deferred to her legal mind, even if it chafed against his own nature. She saw it, recognized it, and a flicker of pride ignited within her. This was her arena. She was in control here. "Once we have the affidavits," Adriana continued, her voice gaining momentum, "we identify the critical legal vulnerabilities. Burke's campaign finances, Rossi's jurisdictional overreach, the international conventions they violated. We link every victim's story to a specific legal breach. We build a fortress of truth around Matteo, making his extradition impossible and their careers, their freedom, untenable." Lorenzo leaned back, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "You truly believe this will work?" "It has to," she declared, her eyes blazing with conviction. "It's the only way to expose them legally, without compromising my standing, and without resorting to methods that would turn us into the very criminals we're fighting." He pushed a map towards her, indicating a small, secluded estate in the countryside. "This is a safe house, secure. We can bring them there, one at a time. My men will be invisible." Adriana felt a surge of relief, followed by a fresh wave of caution. "No intimidation, Lorenzo," she warned, her voice dropping. "No threats. These people are already traumatized. My interviews must be voluntary, their statements freely given. If your men so much as breathe too heavily, if they look like anything other than guardians, this entire strategy crumbles." His eyes narrowed, a challenge in their depths. "You doubt my judgment?" I doubt your world's definition of discreet versus mine, she shot back, unafraid. My ethical boundaries are non-negotiable. If you cannot guarantee that, then I cannot proceed. He held her gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Then, to her surprise, he gave a curt nod. Understood. My men will be instructed. They will be shadows, nothing more. A tense breath escaped her. This was it. This was their alliance, forged in fire and tempered by mutual, if reluctant, respect. He was learning to trust her judgment, to operate within her legal framework, however frustratingly slow it might be for a man of his power. And she, in turn, was learning to trust his protective instincts, his ability to navigate the shadows she couldn't even perceive. The silver signet ring felt warm on her finger now, a symbol not just of a dangerous covenant, but of a bond deepening through this challenging, terrifying collaboration. She had her plan. Now, they just had to execute it. Adriana felt the familiar ache in her shoulders, a constant companion after days hunched over the endless documents. Even with Lorenzo's network actively gathering affidavits, the sheer volume of material to review was daunting. She had organized everything, color-coded, cross-referenced. But still, sometimes a detail would snag her, a fleeting inconsistency that kept her awake at night. Tonight, it was a seemingly innocuous email from Judge Morrison's office, dated the day before her disastrous flight. It was among the files Lorenzo had provided, a general firm update she'd glanced at weeks ago and dismissed. She opened it again, her eyes scanning the familiar masthead. It was a standard memo about new security protocols for digital communications, urging staff to use a newly implemented encryption key for sensitive client information. Encryption key, O'Hare 777. Adriana froze. O'Hare 777. The numbers, the name, screamed at her. Her misprinted boarding pass had also been for a flight departing from O'Hare, and the number printed on it, the one that supposedly rendered her seat unavailable, had been 777. Her breath hitched. That couldn't be a coincidence. No, it was too specific. Her mind raced, replaying every moment. The misprint, the gate agent's almost too perfect regret. Lorenzo's sudden appearance, his almost prescient knowledge of her predicament. She had dismissed it as a bizarre, inconvenient accident. But what if it wasn't? What if it had been deliberate? She pulled up the original, misprinted boarding pass, a photo she'd snapped in her frustration. There it was, Flight 777. Her eyes darted back to the email. Encryption key, O'Hare 777. A cold wave of realization washed over her, followed by a searing heat of shock. Judge Morrison wasn't compromised. She wasn't indifferent. She was running a deep, sealed investigation into Burke and Rossi herself, and she had used Adriana. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The subtle, discouraging tone in Morrison's email, the warning against speculating on highly sensitive, ongoing investigations. It wasn't a dismissal, it was a coded warning. A way to subtly tell Adriana that she was already in an investigation, a much larger one. Morrison had orchestrated the entire misprint to put Adriana, her fiercely principled, incorruptible mentee, exactly where she needed her, inside Lorenzo Vitale's orbit. She needed an ethical insider, someone who could gather evidence against the very conspirators Adriana was now fighting, someone who would operate within a legal framework where Morrison herself could not. Adriana sank into her chair, the air knocked out of her lungs. Betrayal. That was her first, visceral reaction. Her mentor, the woman she revered, had manipulated her, used her, as a pawn in a game far larger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. The anger was a hot, bitter taste in her mouth. She had been a tool, a means to an end, but beneath the anger, a profound sense of relief began to unfurl. Judge Morrison wasn't corrupt. She wasn't a shadow of her former self, tainted by Burke's influence. She was a strategic genius, playing a masterful high-stakes game. The system, her system, wasn't crumbling. It was fighting back in the shadows through unexpected channels. Her trusted mentor hadn't abandoned her. She had covertly deployed her. The complexity of the revelation left her breathless. She was still a pawn, yes, but a chosen pawn, a crucial, ethical piece in a much larger righteous war. The weight of the silver signet ring on her finger suddenly felt different, less like a burden of a dangerous covenant with Lorenzo, and more like a badge of honor in a secret, covert alliance for justice. She had been used, but for the right reasons, and the relief, the sheer, overwhelming relief that her mentor's integrity remained intact, began to outweigh the sting of manipulation. Judge Morrison had been watching. Judge Morrison had been guiding. And now, Adriana finally understood. Adriana found Lorenzo in the study, exactly where she'd left him, amidst the maps and the hushed calls. Her heart still pounded from the revelation, a frantic drum against her ribs. She didn't wait for him to finish his call. She slammed the printout of Judge Morrison's email onto the table, her finger stabbing at the highlighted encryption key. "O'Hare 777, she articulated, her voice tight with a mix of fury and dawning wonder. "My boarding pass, the misprint. It wasn't an accident, Lorenzo. She did this. Judge Morrison did this. She put me on your jet." Lorenzo's phone dropped from his ear, forgotten on the desk. His dark eyes, usually so composed, widened with genuine shock. He picked up the printout, his gaze sweeping over the text, then flicked to Adriana's face, tracing the lines of her anger and disbelief. "Morrison," he murmured, the name a low exhale. He looked at the email again, then back at her. I had suspicions. Her silence, the way she operates. But I respected her too much to ever truly investigate. I thought she was simply too high up, too principled for my world." He paused, a strange, almost rueful smile touching his lips. "You were right, Adriana. She is playing her own game, a masterful one." Then his gaze softened, losing its initial shock and hardening with something else. "And I, too, Adriana, have been trying to work within certain confines, my own code, yes, but also understanding that an overt Mafia solution would be disastrous. For Matteo, for my family, for any hope of a future without constant shadows." He confessed it, not with shame, but with a quiet admission of strategy. He had been trying to build a bridge, just like her. The air in the room seemed to crackle, shifting, from tension to a strange, exhilarating energy. His confession, his silent admission of respect for Morrison's unseen hand, solidified something profound between them. They weren't just allies anymore. They were co-conspirators in a grander, more intricate game. They now had an unseen, powerful ally in Judge Morrison, a ghost in the machine of justice. She needed an insider, Adriana breathed, the anger at being a pawn receding, replaced by a surge of fierce pride. Someone ethical, someone who could expose Burke and Rossi from within your world, but with legal impeccability. Someone who would bring the law to them. Lorenzo nodded, his eyes alight with a new understanding. "And now, we have her, indirectly." He gestured to the maps, the pile of affidavits. "How does this change our plan?" Adriana felt her mind ignite, connecting the dots in a dazzling rush. Morrison's indirect intel wasn't just the encryption key. It was the subtly released data she'd asked Sarah for, the heightened Scrutiny on Burke's campaign, the quiet pressure on certain officials. Morrison had been laying groundwork, clearing pathways. "It changes everything," Adriana declared, grabbing a pen. "It means we don't just have evidence, we have a coordinated strike. Morrison will have her own actions underway, separate but complementary to ours. We use the affidavits to build the public, undeniable case, while she works the internal, sealed investigation." She began outlining, her hand flying across the paper. "We refine our target. Prosecutor Rossi. He's the vulnerable link. Burke is too insulated in Chicago. Rossi, here in Naples, is exposed. We hit him with a tsunami of irrefutable evidence from the affidavits, leveraging Morrison's implicit pressure to force his hand, to make him back off Matteo." Her legal brief, which had been a meticulous but cautious document, transformed into a weapon. She meticulously organized the notarized affidavits, cross-referencing each victim's testimony with specific statutes Rossi and Burke had violated. She built a narrative of systemic abuse, a legal trap so perfectly sprung it would leave no room for escape. Every word was precise, every reference watertight. This wasn't just a case, it was a public execution of their careers. Lorenzo, watching her, made a swift call, his voice low and urgent. His network, already a shadow, now had a precise target. "Rossi's movements," he said, hanging up. "His schedule, his preferred haunts, we'll pinpoint. The exact moment, the exact location, to deliver your knockout blow." Adriana felt a cold thrill. This was it, the culmination. Her eyes swept across the study, landing on a corner where her Vespa helmet, a gift from Lorenzo she'd barely registered, sat patiently. It was a symbol of freedom, of the wind in her hair, of a life she yearned to reclaim. Soon, very soon. But first, justice. Adriana ran her fingers over the stack of notarized affidavits, each page a testament to a human tragedy, each signature a flicker of hope. Her eyes, tired from endless hours of review, scanned the precise legal language one last time. Every detail was unimpeachable, every statement a weapon forged in the crucible of injustice. This wasn't just paper. It was the foundation of their assault, a legal fortress against the corruption of Burke and Rossi. The villa was silent around her, the air thick with the unspoken tension of the coming confrontation. The weight of so many lives rested on these documents. On her. Lorenzo stood by the open terrace doors, the cool evening breeze ruffling his dark hair. He was speaking in low, rapid Italian into a secure phone, his voice a gravelly murmur. She watched him, his profile sharp against the deepening twilight. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, command, precision, absolute control. He ended the call, turning to face her, his gaze intense. "My men are in position," he stated, his voice calm, but with an underlying current of steel. "They will secure the perimeter discreetly, no overt displays of force. No one will suspect a thing until it's too late for Rossi to react." He paused, his dark eyes meeting hers. "And under no circumstances are they to fire a shot, unless absolutely necessary for defense. That was your condition, Adriana. It will be honored." Her breath hitched. He had remembered. He had listened. Even in his world, her rules held weight. A flicker of something akin to respect, something dangerous and warm, stirred within her. He walked closer, his presence a palpable force. "Matteo's fate," he began, his voice dropping, "rests on this. And yours, Adriana. I am concerned for your safety." His confession was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it held more truth than any grand declaration. It was vulnerability, raw and unexpected. Adriana felt a tremor run through her. Fear was a cold, constant companion, but hearing him voice his concern, acknowledging the peril, somehow solidified her resolve. She looked at him, truly looked at the man who had pulled her into this maelstrom, and saw not just power, but a deep, fierce loyalty that extended even to her. "I know," she said, her voice steady despite the frantic beat of her heart. "But this has to be done, Lorenzo, for Matteo, for every victim of their pipeline, for the system I believe in." Her commitment wasn't just a statement, it was a vow, an unbreakable promise to herself and to those who had no voice. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. "Trust was earned," he murmured, his gaze holding hers. It wasn't a question, but an acknowledgement, a quiet, powerful understanding passing between them, a bond forged in fire and tempered by the impossible circumstances they shared. The silver signet ring felt warm on her finger, a symbol of that earned trust. He straightened, the moment of intimacy receding, replaced by the sharp focus of the mission. "Rossi," he confirmed, his voice now crisp, devoid of emotion. "He will be at the Palazzo Vittoria tonight, a gala ostensibly for a visiting dignitary, a stunning Neapolitan rooftop, the perfect stage for your performance." Adriana swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The Palazzo Vittoria, a high-profile event, a stunning rooftop overlooking the glittering bay. The drama was almost unbearable. Rossi, oblivious, would be celebrating, believing himself untouchable. She would be there, a weapon of law and truth, ready to dismantle his world peace. By peace, the final plunge was imminent. There was no turning back. The Neapolitan evening was a velvet cloak, warm and intoxicating. Adriana stood on the Palazzo Vittoria's rooftop terrace. The city spread out beneath her like a jewel box flung open, thousands of lights twinkling against the dark expanse of the bay. The air hummed with the sophisticated chatter of the gala, the clink of crystal, the soft strains of a string quartet. Prosecutor Rossi, a corpulent man with a self-satisfied smirk, was holding court near a marble balustrade, oblivious. He laughed, a booming sound that grated on Adriana's raw nerves. This was it. She clutched her small, sleek satellite device, a piece of technology Lorenzo had provided, feeling its cold weight in her palm. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. Lorenzo stood a step behind her, a silent, formidable presence, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The silver signet ring on her finger felt like a brand, hot against her skin. Then, without warning, the world plunged into darkness. The city lights, the villa lights, the delicate glow of the rooftop, all vanished. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, quickly followed by a chaotic murmur. The string quartet faltered, then fell silent. Emergency lights, dim and uncertain, flickered on, casting long, grotesque shadows. The grand rooftop, moments before a picture of elegance, was now a scene of disoriented chaos, the city below a terrifying, uncertain abyss. Adriana's breath caught. Blackout. It was an unexpected, dramatic twist, amplifying the tension to an almost unbearable degree. Her fear was a cold, sharp blade, but a surge of adrenaline ignited a fierce resolve. This was her stage, however dark. She saw Rossi, his face a pale, confused blur in the emergency light. He was looking around, annoyed, but not yet afraid. Not yet. Adriana took a deep breath, the scent of jasmine and fear filling her lungs. She moved, Lorenzo's hand a steadying anchor at her back, guiding her through the disoriented crowd. She stopped just a few feet from Rossi, her gaze locking onto his. "Prosecutor Rossi," she said, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd, clearer and sharper than she thought possible. Her voice was amplified by a small, discreet microphone Lorenzo had equipped her with, his silent preparation for this very moment. Rossi turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her. He knew who she was now. He knew she was Lorenzo's lawyer. His smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Signorina Carter, what an unexpected pleasure." His tone was laced with condescension. "I think you'll find it quite expected, prosecutor," Adriana countered, her voice unwavering. She held up the satellite device, a small beacon in the dimness. "I have something for you, and for the world." With a flick of her wrist, she activated the device. A small blue light pulsed. She saw Lorenzo's men, shadows among shadows, subtly shifting, forming an unyielding perimeter around them. Their silent presence was a palpable threat, a promise of consequences should Rossi try anything. They were disciplined, invisible, precisely as Lorenzo had promised. "These," Adriana declared, her voice ringing out, carrying across the hushed rooftop, "are notarized affidavits from the victims of your humanitarian visa pipeline, people you exploited, people you enslaved, people you traded like commodities with Alderman Burke." She didn't wait for his reaction. Her fingers flew across the device's interface. She began live streaming. The affidavits, page by damning page, flowed across the digital ether. A concise summary of her findings, meticulously prepared, followed. She targeted every international legal aid organization, every human rights group, and the carefully curated list of journalists Judge Morrison's office had subtly tipped off. She saw the confirmation messages flash across the screen, streaming live, global reach. Rossi's face went ashen. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking like a ghost in the flickering emergency light. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, for a way to silence her. But there was nowhere to go. The silent, unyielding perimeter of Lorenzo's men, the relentless flow of damning evidence across the world, the sudden, terrifying darkness of the city below, it all converged into an inescapable trap. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a public, irreversible attack on his career, his freedom, his very existence. Adriana watched him, a cold, hard satisfaction settling in her gut. Justice, finally, was finding its way, even in the shadows. Prosecutor Rossi's face contorted, a mask of pure, unadulterated fury in the dim emergency light. "You insolent little lawyer!" he spat, his voice hoarse with rage, echoing slightly in the sudden quiet of the rooftop. "You think a few fabricated papers and a cheap stunt will touch me? I am Prosecutor Rossi. This is Naples. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Adriana felt a cold tremor run through her, but her grip on the satellite device remained steady. His threats were a desperate bluff, a cornered animal's snarl. She had seen this tactic before in courtrooms, but never with such raw, unhinged venom. The words were meant to intimidate, to make her back down, to unravel everything she had built. But she wouldn't. Not now. Not when justice hung so precariously in the balance. Lorenzo stepped forward then, a silent, powerful movement that placed him directly between Adriana and Rossi. He didn't touch the prosecutor, didn't raise his voice, but his presence alone was a shield, a wall of unyielding force. His dark eyes, usually so expressive, were now flat, devoid of emotion, making them all the more terrifying. "My code, prosecutor," Lorenzo said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the lingering chaos of the blackout, "is simple. No trafficking, no exploitation." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a stark, chilling reminder of the very crimes Rossi had committed. "You violated that code. You abused innocent people, and now you will face the consequences." Rossi sputtered, attempting another threat, his eyes darting frantically around the perimeter, but there was nowhere to run. Lorenzo's men, shadows among shadows, stood unmoving. They were silent, disciplined, their forms barely discernible against the flickering emergency lights, yet their presence was overwhelming. They were not overtly aggressive, not a single weapon openly displayed, but the message was clear. They were there, and they would not allow Rossi to escape or harm Adriana. They were upholding Lorenzo's no shots fired order, a testament to his control, but their silent readiness was a threat more potent than any shout. The weight of the undeniable, globally streamed evidence, the silent, unwavering presence of Lorenzo's men, and the immediate public threat of international legal fallout slowly began to crush Rossi. The bluster drained from him, leaving him deflated, defeated, his shoulders slumped. The self-satisfied smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified realization of his utter ruin. His power, so absolute moments before, evaporated like smoke in the Neapolitan breeze. He was trapped, cornered, exposed to the world, and there was nothing he could do. He crumbled. Adriana watched him, a wave of immense relief washing over her, so profound it almost buckled her knees. She had done it. She had faced down a corrupt power, a man who thought himself untouchable, and she had won. Her principles, her ethics, her unwavering belief in due process, they were not just intact, they were triumphant. She hadn't compromised, she hadn't broken the law, she had wielded it, a sharp, precise blade, to cut through the darkness. The satisfaction was exhilarating, a surge of pure, unadulterated victory. Lorenzo turned then, his dark eyes meeting hers. The flat, impredatory look was gone, replaced by an intensity that stole her breath. Admiration blazed in their depths, raw and undeniable. Respect, deep and earned, shimmered between them, and beneath it all, a profound, nascent love, unspoken but palpable, a dangerous new current in the aftermath of their shared storm. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, his thumb brushing over the silver signet ring that now felt like a second skin. In the flickering shadows, amidst the chaos of a city plunged into darkness, justice had found its light. The news spread like wildfire across Naples, a furious blaze consuming Prosecutor Rossi's carefully constructed world. Official statements, carefully worded but utterly damning, confirmed his immediate suspension. An international investigation launched into the humanitarian visa pipeline. Matteo's extradition was officially halted, his innocence affirmed, a small victory in a much larger war. Adriana watched the reports on a small, discreet television. In the villa's study, a profound sense of exhaustion settling over her, heavy but satisfying. She had done it. A discreet ping from her encrypted device. Judge Morrison. Adriana opened the message, her heart thrumming. It was brief, coded, but utterly clear. Morrison's sealed investigation would now proceed to public charges against Alderman Burke. The circle was closing. The system, her system, was working. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but it was working. She leaned back, the leather armchair creaking softly. The journey flashed before her eyes. The misprinted boarding pass, the fear, the anger, the impossible choice. She had been a lawyer lost at an airport, a pawn in a game she hadn't understood, but she hadn't been a pawn. She had been a force. She had saved an innocent man, exposed deep, insidious corruption, and navigated a world she never knew existed, all while fiercely upholding her legal ethics. Her agency, she realized, had never truly been lost. It had been powerfully affirmed, hardened and sharpened by every terrifying choice she'd made. She hadn't bent, she hadn't broken. She had prevailed. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the golden light of the setting sun. He walked towards her, his movements slow, deliberate, his dark eyes fixed on hers. The unspoken desire between them was a palpable thing, a heavy, intoxicating current in the quiet room. She felt the pull, deep and undeniable, a dangerous magnetism that threatened to consume her. He stopped just inches away, his gaze falling to the silver signet ring on her finger, then back up to her face. "We did it, Adriana," he murmured, his voice a low, rough caress. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing against her skin. The touch sent a shiver through her, a tremor of desire she couldn't suppress. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the warmth, the intensity, before pulling back, just slightly, enough to create a sliver of space. Her convictions, hard-won and battle-tested, were her anchor. "Yes, we did," she agreed, her voice steady, despite the frantic beat of her heart. She looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. "And now, we need to talk about what happens next. About us." He listened, his expression unreadable, but she saw the flicker of understanding, the anticipation in his eyes. He knew this was coming. "Lorenzo," she began, choosing her words carefully but with absolute resolve. "I have profound feelings for you. I respect your code, your loyalty, the way you protect your family, but I cannot be consumed by your world. My world is the law. My principles are non-negotiable." His jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his gaze intense. "If there is to be anything between us," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "there are ironclad boundaries. Absolute non-interference in my legal cases. No intelligence, no resources, no influence, unless I specifically request it, and only if it adheres to ethical legal practice, and an unwavering commitment to my ethical principles. Always. I will not compromise my bar standing for anyone, for anything." She held her breath, waiting. This was her line in the sand, her ultimate test of his respect, his love. She respected him enough to speak her truth, even if it meant losing him. He searched her eyes for a long moment, a storm of emotions swirling in his own dark depths. Then, slowly, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was tender, almost vulnerable. "Agreed, Adriana," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Ironclad, your law, your ethics, always." He lifted her hand, his thumb tracing the cool silver of the signet ring. "But know this, mia avvocatessa, my loyalty, once given, is absolute, and my protection, while discreet, will always be yours." She looked at him, a fierce mix of triumph and tenderness blooming in her chest. She had faced down a Mafia boss and won, not just justice, but her own terms. It was a victory unlike any other. 6 months had melted into the vibrant rhythm of Chicago, a stark contrast to the dramatic shadows of Naples. Adriana stood on the familiar courthouse steps, the brisk autumn air a welcome bite against her cheeks. Inside, a quiet victory had just unfolded. Matteo, Lorenzo's innocent cousin, had been granted asylum, his case meticulously built on the undeniable evidence Adriana had unearthed. He was free, rebuilding his life in a small, tight-knit Italian community in the city, learning English, finding work. He'd sent her a handwritten thank-you card, his gratitude palpable even through the simple words. The system, Adriana had proved, could indeed work. It had taken a Mafia boss, a corrupt alderman, a rogue prosecutor, and her own legal acrobatics, but justice had prevailed. Her own firm, while initially bewildered by her sabbatical, had welcomed her back, her reputation somehow enhanced by the vague rumors of a high-stakes international pro bono case. Judge Morrison, with a knowing glint in her eyes, had simply said, "Well done, Carter. You always did have a knack for finding the truth." The alderman, Burke, was now facing a litany of charges, his political career crumbling under the weight of Morrison's expertly sealed investigation, now fully public. One evening, a thick embossed envelope arrived at her office, anonymous, bearing only a small, discreetly engraved crest. Inside was a blueprint, architectural renderings of a state-of-the-art legal aid clinic, dedicated to assisting immigrants caught in bureaucratic traps. Its proposed location, a neglected corner of Chicago, in a neighborhood teeming with new arrivals. Funding was already secured, construction underway. There was no sender name, no note, just the subtle scent of expensive paper and a familiar, almost imperceptible silver signet pressed into the wax seal. Lorenzo. A silent act of philanthropy, a profound redemption. His loyalty over profit code, subtly shaped by her own unwavering principles, had manifested in stone and glass, a quiet testament to the darkness they had faced and the light they had found. Adriana's stride was confident as she descended the courthouse steps, her briefcase no longer a burden, but a tool of righteous purpose. She was more confident, more effective than ever. The system hadn't broken her, it had sharpened her. She was a beacon of integrity, a force for good in a world that desperately needed it. Her phone buzzed. A picture message. Lorenzo. Standing on a sun-drenched Neapolitan terrace, a glass of wine in his hand, a hint of that dangerous, charming smile playing on his lips. He didn't need to say anything. The image spoke volumes. Their relationship was a complex, evolving partnership, a delicate dance between two worlds that should never have collided. There was deep respect, an undeniable attraction that still sparked fiercely between them, and the ironclad boundaries she had established. He respected her autonomy, her cases, her ethics. He understood that her world was non-negotiable, and his protection, while always present, remained a discreet shadow, never an interference. She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. She wasn't lost anymore. She was found. She was here. She reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around a new silver band. It was simple, elegant, not the ancient signet ring, but a sleek, modern piece, a subtle counterpoint to the more ornate one Lorenzo still wore. It had arrived again, anonymously, a week ago. This wasn't a symbol of possession, but of something deeper, something truly equal, a unique, powerful partnership, forged in the crucible of fear and injustice, now thriving in the tender light of earned trust. She slipped it onto her finger, feeling its cool weight, a constant reminder of the darkness they faced and the light of justice and love they had found in the most unexpected of places, her new horizon. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.